It's James here. I wanted to share PiTrac's new optical de-distortion feature with everyone and also to provide some instructions for how to use that feature. Here is a preview in the video of how it works, which we'll talk about in just a moment. As background, PiTrac is built on the idea of trying to do clever things with inexpensive hardware, and we think that's a great goal, but there's lots of challenges in doing so. One challenge is that the lower priced cameras and lenses, especially the lenses that we use, generally have some optical distortions in them. They're not intentional, it's just the way things work. And those distortions can make straight lines in an image appear curved, and worse yet for us, these distortions can make otherwise perfect circles, like for instance the image of a golf ball. They can make those circles appear, well, non-circular. Often these distortions result in a sort of a fisheye or barrel looking image for our cameras, although other types of distortion also exist. Here's some examples of these types of distortions shown with the grid. Now, if you're taking like a family photo or a vacation photo, that's probably not a big deal, but for PiTrac, which relies on accurate ball identification, a golf ball that looks more like a football isn't going to be easy to accurately identify as a circle. Here's an example here. So without doing anything to make up for the distortions in most of the lenses we use, the system could end up with images looking like this. And since various metrics in PiTrac, like the radius of a ball for instance, help us determine the position and the distance to that ball, well, then if it's hard to determine the radius here, then we're going to have accuracy and precision problems downstream of that. To make up for these distortions in the lenses, and in the filter for that matter, the IR filter for camera 2, we adopted a process that manipulates the images that we receive in order to undo those distortions. In the past, we used a regular checkerboard as a reference image to try to come up with a mathematical transform that would undo the distortions. Since we knew that the checkerboard should have the same size squares and everything in straight lines, we knew that if it didn't look like that to the camera, we had to transform it so that it did. Using that knowledge about the checkerboard, we determine a transform that takes whatever warped image we might receive of the checkerboard and then undistorts and unwarps the image to where it looks like a perfect checkerboard again. And whatever transform works for that particular example of the checkerboard, we would then save that transform and use it going forward whenever PiTrac took a picture. Shown here is the actual calibration matrix and de-distortion vectors that are used inside of PiTrac to enable this. The problem is that the original process to get to this transform was really time consuming and error prone. If the board is even slightly out of the camera's viewport, the image would be rejected, and it was so difficult. A lot of folks, sometimes including yours truly here, often just skip the de-distortion process. And unfortunately, that leads to a number of potential problems, including decreased accuracy and inconsistent results generally. Well, good news. At Galapagos, designed a new de-distortion process that's like 100 times easier and more accurate than before, and that is actually kind of fun to perform. The new process uses what's called a Churruca board, shown here. It's an improved checkerboard, and it allows the image or the system to process the checkerboard image even if part of that image is off the edge of the screen. The de-distortion process, the new process, is available in the user interface. PiTrac user interface is shown here. And in order to use it, of course, you need to first print a Churruca board. Well, that's pretty easy because the board pattern is actually available right in the user interface. I'm going to show you here the process of printing that board. And the one thing to ensure is that you print the board at actual size, in other words, at 100%. You can see that here. Next, you need to take the printout and mount it on something really flat. You can use a binder, for example, though it's better to tape the sheet of paper to the binder instead of putting it behind the clear cover of the binder. Otherwise, it's clear as shown here that the cover can create some weird reflections. And also, you want to be able to hold whatever it is that you've got the board on without obscuring too much of the checkerboard. It's okay if your finger's over part of it, but you want to have some place where you can hold on to it. And of course, I went way overboard and mounted the paper into a thin piece of plywood as shown here, but you be you. Next, you want to make sure that you've got lots of light when you're calibrating. I actually keep the teed ball light on that lights up the ball when it's teed up, even though it's kind of blinding. I keep that on for the whole process as well as the room lights. And also, and this is important, we don't have a camera 2 synchronicity with the infrared strobe lights or the external shutter in the de-distortion process yet. So if you're de-distorting camera 2, we are going to have to temporarily turn off the external triggering and remove the filter, the infrared filter. So to do this, first thing, let's turn off the external triggering. You're going to need to edit the file config.txt under boot firmware. You may not have seen this file. It's something that gets modified and set up by PiTrac when PiTrac installs. You'll have to, at least for now, use sudo, S-U-D-O, sudo, and then VI or whatever your editor is to get into this file. When you get into it, look for the line that has sync. That's the line of the file that you will need to comment out by putting a pound sign in front of it. When you edit this file, be very careful, because if you leave some extraneous character somewhere, it can actually cause the Pi not to boot. So just be real careful, just comment out this one line, save the file, and then reboot. Also, you're going to pull the filter that allows only infrared and not visible filter off of the flight camera, camera 2. Try not to twist the filter as you do that, because that would upset your focus. Then we're going to run the de-distortion calibration for camera 2, just like you will for camera 1, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And afterward, you can replace the IR filter and go back in and remove the comment in config.txt and reboot, and your PiTrac should be ready to run normally again. A couple of other notes before we actually demonstrate this new process. First, some folks are using flipped cameras. This is when you've told PiTrac that the camera you're using is in an upside-down orientation, usually to help make routing the MIPI MIPI cables easier. I'm actually showing an example, if you look closely here, where you're seeing an upside-down image in the anti-distortion calibration process. Now, if you've done this, the process won't flip the camera for you, as shown here, but that's okay, because this doesn't affect the process. If you've got a flip camera, just run the de-distortion process as you would otherwise. Just remember, you'll have to move the Chirurco board around in the opposite direction that the preview image will show. Second, the teed ball camera number 1 looks downward at the mat. So in order to hold the checkerboard in front of the entire camera 1 viewport, you will probably have to temporarily tilt the PiTrac backward so you can get the board in front of it more easily. Next, we're going to use just this Chirurco board and our new lens distortion calibration tool to calibrate camera 2. Camera 2, I've taken the filter off of because this has to use visible light, at least right now. And I've also disengaged the external trigger for camera 2 so that we could take a picture with it. You'll know that works if you can do an RPI cam -still, and for camera 1, which is effectively our flight camera. And if you can do that, then you've got everything set up to run this calibration. So to start the calibration, just go into the calibration user interface. Make sure you're in the lens distortion tab. And in this case, we'll just click on camera 2, and the system will immediately start providing a preview and giving you directions as to what part of the viewport it wants or suggests that the board be put into next. What we're going to do is we're going to take this calibration board and we're going to move it around in front of camera 2 as instructed by the calibration function. And when we get enough good pictures, it will create a distortion vector and a matrix for the camera, which will undo, hopefully, all lens-related distortion. So you just need to take the board and show it to the camera that you're calibrating. The process needs to see the board in a variety of different areas of the viewport, and preferably at different orientations or tilts. Although again, this was originally pretty difficult, the new distortion process makes it really easy. And with the Charuka board, you don't even need to ensure the whole board is in the image. It works fine even if a little bit of the board is off the edge of the camera's view, and in fact, in some cases, that having a little bit of the board off the edge is helpful for an accurate de-distortion matrix to be computed. The new process tells you where in the image it still needs more images of the board. It gives helpful advice about moving the board closer or further, and also if a couple images are too similar, it'll tell you that. It's actually kind of fun to see how quickly you can get each of the 9 sections of the grid lit up to green. I found that once you get a picture in one section of the grid, it's best to get 1 or 2 more there while you're in the right position for that section. So here I'm just showing you what you would see if you were moving the board around. Note that the preview window currently can lag a bit behind where the board actually is, so that takes a bit to get used to. I'm sure we'll get that improved. Once all of the grid sections have been covered, the process will end and will automatically put the calibration transform information into your calibrations.json file. From this point on, the system will use the new transform for all images with, in this case, camera 2. The next thing to do is to use a calibration rig to redo any camera angle calibration process to ensure that metrics like the measured focal distance and angles of each of the cameras are as accurate as possible. Obviously, the rest of the system depends on knowing the exact angle and focal distance of the cameras. Performing this process makes quite a difference. As shown here, the resulting ball looks pretty much perfectly circular, and there might be a little lateral error here, but not much. And if you look at a side-by-side comparison of the calibration images, the difference is pretty amazing. So in any case, happy travels with the new PiTrac De-distortion process.